Okay, let's make a start. Just to set the context. So we began a couple of weeks ago as an introduction and a quick whirlwind tour of this epic poem of Sri Aurobindo, Savitri. Mahesh gave us a beautiful introduction into what Savitri is all about, and there was interest to continue that further and possibly read some passages from Savitri. So Mahesh obliged us, and this has now become a series of rooms. So we're in the third such session. We read a portion of the Book of Beginnings, the beginning of Savitri, and today Mahesh plans to go further into the Book of Beginnings and. Later on, pick up some important cantos of the epic and go from there. So, over to you, Mahesh, and possibly we'll try to keep like similar format like last time. Wherever you feel like a logical pause, we will
Yeah.
pause there and open for question and answers and general discussion. Yeah.
Yes, Hemant. Yeah, sounds
Okay.
good.
Lovely. Over to
Yeah.
you then, Mahesh. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thanks. Thanks, Hemant. So, today, again, I mean, good evening, everybody. Good evening, good morning, whatever. So today, before we sort of dip into Savitri, I wanted to read a small passage from another poem of Sri Aurobindo. Um, now, I wanted to sort of read that passage for a very specific reason, and the reason being to sort of you know evaluate our own efforts, right, at approaching Savitri specifically, in the context of this room, and any other efforts pertaining to yoga and sadhana that we all might be doing in one way or another. Right, so it's a slightly long passage, but um, I felt it was very relevant and it's a beautiful passage. So this passage is from Sri Aurobindo's collected poems. The poem's title is called The Rishi, right? It's a slightly long poem. Um, Rishi is the title, and the Rishi is a dialogue between two characters. One is the Rishi himself, and another is a sort of prototypal or typal representation of the human aspirant. So in this particular case, Sri Aurobindo has called the character as Manu, the representative man, the typal man, who sort of represents all the best that there is in humanity, and sort of he has reached the crown of his attainments, and he goes to the Rishi to look for further knowledge. Right? That's the poem. That's what the poem is about. So this particular passage, it starts with Manu. It's a long back and forth, right? The poem is basically the dialogue between, basically a dialogue between Manu and this rishi. Um, so let me just read it out for you all. Manu, alas, is life then vain? Our gorgeous youth, lithe and tall, our sweet fair women with their tender eyes, outshining stars. The mighty meditations of the wise, the grandiose wars, the blood, the fiery strife, the clenched dead hands, the circled spars, the various labor in 100 lands, are all these shows to please some audience cold, as in a vase lily and rose, mixed snow and crimson, for a moment blaze, till someone throws the withered petals in some outer dust. Heeding not, the virtuous man made one with the unjust. Is this our lot? Rishi. Now the Rishi responds, right? Rishi. O king, sight is not in vain, nor any sound. Reeds that float upon a puddle, and the majestic round of the suns are thoughts eternal. What man loves to laud, and what he shuns. Through glorious things and days the wheel of God forever runs. O king, no thought is vain. Our very dreams substantial are. The light we see in fancy yonder gleams in the star. Manu, Rishi, are we both dreams and real, the near even as the far? Rishi, dreams are we not, O king, but see dreams, fear, therefore, and strive. Like poets, in a wondrous world of thought, always we live, whose shapes from out ourselves to being brought, abide and thrive. The poet, from his vast and laboring mind, brings brilliant out a living world. Forth into space they wind the shining route, and hate and love and laugh and weep, enjoy, fight and shout. King, lord and beggar, tender girl and boy, foemen, friends. So to his creatures, God's poetic mind a substance lends. The poet, with dazzling inspiration blind, until it ends, forgets himself and lives in what he forms. Forever his soul through chaos like a wind creating storms, till the stars roll through ordered space and the green lands arise, the snowy pole, ocean and this great heaven full of ice and sweet sounds heard. Man with his wondrous soul of hate and love, and beast and bird, yes, he creates the worlds and heaven above with a single word. And these things, being himself, are real. Yet are they like dreams, for he awakes to self, he could forget in what he seems. Yet, king, deem nothing vain, through many veils the spirit gleams. The dreams of God are truths, and he prevails. Then all is time, cherish thyself, O king, and cherish men anchored in him. I'll stop there. So this particular line, right? It's been something that has sort of sustained me in the path of sadhana, right? This particular line, and he says, "Yet, king, deem nothing vain," and it's almost like a assurance, right? It's a sort of spiritual certitude. So, so the reason I wanted to read that out, like I mentioned, is because Savitri, in a sense, can be very challenging. uh, Epic poem, longest poem. So there's quite a lot of material to go through, and because Sri Aurobindo is talking of phenomena which is so far removed from ourselves, utterly far, right? So many times, unless one has a good imagination, the imaginative mind, right, when one can sort of look at the material and sort of conjure all these images in one's in the mind's eye. Unless you could do that, it's going to be a rather taxing affair, you know until either an experience or something sort of propels you, and you're sort of seized by that hunger, right, that curiosity where you can't put the book down, and you are sort of running through it as if as if you were famished all your life, and you're drawing sustenance from which is what this Savitri is all about. But by the time you could get there, it could take a while. So so I think, like what the Rishi tells Manu, deem nothing vain. All the effort, all that you're taking, eventually adds up to something. So with that, let me get back to Savitri. Let me get back to Savitri. I think last week we finished. I think it was at one moment. I just got the book. Yeah, I think just a little after all can be done if the God touches there. I think that's where we left last week. So
Yeah.
I'll begin from there, so that there's some sort of a continuity, right? There is a continuity from where we left off last week. All can be done if the God touches there. A hope stole in that hardly dared to be amid the night's forlorn indifference, as if solicited in an alien world with timid and hazardous instinctive grace, orphaned and driven out to seek a home, an errant marvel with no place to live. Into a far off nook of heaven there came, a slow, miraculous gesture's dim appeal, the persistent thrill of a transfiguring touch persuaded the inert black quietude and beauty and wonder disturbed the fields of God. A wandering hand of pale, enchanted light that glowed along a fading moment's brink, fixed with gold panel and opalescent hinge, a gate of dreams ajar on mystery's verge. One lucent corner windowing hidden things forced the world's blind immensity to sight. The darkness failed and slipped like a falling cloak from the reclining body of a god. Uh, his so creation beginning, so there is the inconscient. So we saw last week how Sri Aurobindo is describing, from the very inconscient, how this move impulse to creation is beginning, right? So he's sort of laying out the process step by step. Uh so a hope stole in that hardly dared to be amid the night's forlorn indifference. And I mean, this condition is something that every sadhak can relate to, right? Because in your normal consciousness, it is either a night or a twilight, and the twilight doesn't care about you, So all that is there is indifference to all your, trials and your anguish and everything, right? And in such a environment, a hope is sort of stealing its way in, right? Now, the way again, Sri Aurobindo was saying it, as if solicited in an alien world, with timid and hazardous instinctive grace, orphaned and driven out to seek a home. Now, this hope, the way the way Sri Aurobindo is talking of hope, I mean, you can think of it like a little puppy that is afraid, right? There's this cute little puppy, it's a new house, you know, and yeah, all the timidity that the puppy might display. That's what this little hope is, right? Because it's being, pulled into this alien world where it doesn't know anything, right? And that's why he says, with timid and hazardous instinct of grace, orphaned and driven out to seek a home, right? So this hope has come from elsewhere, right? And it has to sort of enter this field of night, this inconscient base, right? So hope is sort of coming in, and but look at the way he's sort of making this connection, right? Orphaned and driven out to seek a home, an errant marvel with no place to live. Okay. An errant marvel with no place to live. Into a far off nook
Beautiful.
of heaven they came, a slow, miraculous gesture's dim appeal. And it's like, you need to let this wash over you, right? It's the he's if you think about it, what Shiravindo is doing is, if you had a high speed camera, and there's this very popular series of photographs of a horse running, so people back in those days, I believe, they thought, none of the hooves touch the ground until early part, when photography was invented. They sort of take pictures of the horse galloping, and they see that, it does indeed, the hooves do indeed touch the ground, though it's pretty swift, right? And I was sort of breaking it down, right? Now, that's what Sri Aurobindo is doing. He's literally time slicing this process step by step, and he's telling you all the mutations, all the, cleaving that's happening. Now, why is this important? This is important because the more you're able to, the more we are able to, the more we are able to sort of follow the unfolding process, right, of whatever he's describing, whether it's unfolding or it's a journey, or whatever it is, right? Because he's so precise, and he sort of uh, what do you say, dissects the process to a very granular point. the more you're able to sort of follow the line of thought, follow that psychology, it becomes like a little guidebook for us in evaluating things in our own being, as in when they happen to us, right? So that's a reason why, it's sort of extremely useful to sort of look at it at this level of resolution, so to speak, right? The persistent thrill of a transfiguring touch persuaded the inert black quietude, and beauty and wonder disturbed the fields of God. And the persistent thrill of a transfiguring touch, right? Yeah. Uh, so for those of you um, who have had these flights of, let's say, bhakti, for instance, right, devotion to the divine, not just the vital devotion, but a little bit of maybe the psychic influence, right? You would find that it has the nature of a sweet wind. It's like, I don't know, zephyr. It's like a soft, sweet breath that puts a little smile on your face. Or even if you have some sort of a grief, it's a psychic grief. It's a very pleasurable grief. Of course, you're not crying, you're not wailing, nothing like that, right? It's a very quiet, but deep, intense sort of delight. Now, when that happens, you would find that the more it lingers, you feel like uh, changing yourself more, right? Now, it's not asking you anything, right? But you feel like it. You feel like opening yourself more, surrendering yourself more, serving, yourself more, all to that particular form or power or whatever, right? Now, 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 that's what he's sort of hinting at. The persistent thrill of a transfiguring touch persuaded the inert black quietude. Right? And it's a glorious way to describe that state of I don't want to call it tamas, but it's something else because I think tamas has not yet even appeared in the picture because this is things are sort of unfolding from the inconscient. So those higher qualities, whether it's tamas, rajas, and sattva, they've not even entered into this play as of now, right? So persuaded the inert black quietude and beauty and wonder disturb the fields of God. Look at the way he's saying it, right? And beauty and wonder disturbed the fields of God. A wandering hand of pale, enchanted light that glowed along a fading moment's brink. Again, just glorious lines, right? So imagine a ray of light, right? Which is extremely pale, worn down, diluted, because by the time it gets to the inconscient, obviously it's going to have some difficulty retaining its illumination, right? So a wandering hand of pale, enchanted light that glowed along a fading moment's brink, right? So there's a moment that sort of uh, fleeing off, so to speak, right? Imagine it's like a car going away, and the tail lights, they make that little streak, right? If you shoot it in a slightly slower shutter speed or whatever, right? It's like that. So there's a moment which is sort of going away, and in that fading moment's brink, there is this hand of pale enchanted light, right? Fixed with gold panel and opalescent hinge, a gate of dreams ajar on mystery's verge. Right. So you have the border of mystery sitting there, and there is this hand that's come and set up a little door, like a portal door, right? I mean, now that we have so many sci-fi movies floating around, this should be easier to imagine, right? Because you would have seen, let's say, for example, in Doctor Strange, the way he conjures portals in thin air, right? And you sort of pass on to something else. Now, similar, right? Right. So there is a gold panel with a opalescent hinge that's been fixed. But what does this lead to? A gate of dreams ajar. It's already open on mystery's verge. Right? A gate of dreams ajar on mystery's verge. One lucent corner, windowing hidden things, forced the world's blind immensity to sight. Right now, the one lucent
Beautiful.
corner, amazing, right? I mean,
Yeah, beautiful.
his Sri Aurobindo can be a little reckless, actually. I often feel that he shows up saying, what the hell are you going to do about it? I can't write like this, you know. So, so one loosened corner, windowing hidden things, forced the world's blind immensity to sight. Now, so the world is blind, so there is this immense blindness, you can't see anything. Remember, inconscient, right? Now, sight is yet to be, right? Sight is yet to be. But but this gold panel is in that little corner, this little gold panel, which was, even when it was framed ajar. It's open, but it's there in one little corner amidst this blind, this immense blindness, right? In that one little corner, now, what is that one little corner doing? The one little corner is forcing the world's blind immensity to sight, because it was fixed. You see this sort of vision entering into play. The capacity for vision, and there is a light. So, the moment you say light, then it sort of presumes vision, right? Because without vision, it doesn't make sense. Uh, Now, but it's there in one corner. But even though it's in one corner, what is its function? It's sort of making this entire immensity to sort of turn its head, so to speak, right? And look at that one particular place. Now, I can give a nice parallel for any of you who's who do any sort of intense, any sort of meditation, right? And if you have had that experience of your third eye region opening, uh, and and you begin to see various things, but there's this specific type of experience where people begin to see some light out there, right? Now, recollect how it felt for you when it happened. That's exactly what's happening here, right? Because in your being there is night, for all the complexity that you have, that you are as a human being. It is still twilight, it's ignorance, right? So it's all pretty dim, dull, dark, and so on. But once you make this breakthrough in contacting any one of the contacting or opening to any one of the inner power centers or influence centers or inner being, whatever, right? One of the million things that can happen. But you always, and unless you're lucky and you've had a flood that sort of, sweeping into you, uh, typically it starts as a very small trickle. It's just a pinhole, something is pierced, and it sort of enters. And these two lines, it would really help if you sort of thought about it from that experience standpoint. And then comes, these again. I don't even know how we can write like this, right? The darkness failed. So, remember darkness, this little window, light seeping in, and the darkness is sort of forced to see because of this little luminous gate that is being set up there. The darkness failed and slipped like a falling cloak, right? Like a falling cloak from the reclining body of a god.
What a beautiful image. Oh
What
God.
about that light? I,
Beautiful.
this is where, if my humble Tamil Nadu roots come down, right? When I read lines like this, I want to do whistle and throw color papers like they do in theaters, actually.
Oh, just the imagery of it. My goodness. Beautiful.
It's a stunning line, and
Yeah.
the way he uses the way he has framed it, right? From the reclining body of a god, and the cloak is, the darkness is falling like a cloak, right? Now, right? And then follow the next two lines. Watch, I mean, the next three lines rather. Then, through the pallid drift that seemed at first hardly enough for a trickle from the suns, outpoured the revelation and the flame. So now this brief, I mean, this narrow breach, right? It's like a little crevice. It's a very small gap, right? So and he says through this pallid drift that seemed at first hardly enough for a trickle from the suns. So of course he's speaking of the spiritual suns, right? He's not talking about the normal suns. So he's putting the plural there. So he says it's so you know insignificant. That's the size of the breach that has happened in the inconscient. Right? It is there's hardly enough space for anything more than a trickle to come in, right? And then he paused. I mean, he puts a comma, and he says, "Outpoured the revelation and the flame." And this is that, So remember the very first time when the eye appeared, there was a little stirring, things were uncomfortable in the inconscient. And then, hope, after a series of things, uh, hope enters, and then there is, hope that sort of, then the wandering hand comes and sets up the gate, and the darkness is falling off. But even this, so he says, all of this is hardly seems anything. Sorry, it hardly seems anything, right? But but from that breach outpoured the revelation and the flame. Now think of this as like the pulsation after the big bang, right? So it's not just one bang. There's aftershocks after aftershocks, just reverberating through this field of existence, is it? Whatever which is going to come into play right now. In this particular context, there are these sort of aftershock waves that are traveling, and he says, outpoured the revelation and the flame, the brief but perpetual sign recurred above. Now again, this is one of those typical mystic writings, right? I don't want to sort of explain this because this is so abstract. You could take it to be many different things. You could interpret it in the way that you really want because, the brief perpetual sign recurred above. So what is that sign? Who's showing that sign? And why is it recurring? So what does that recurring mean to me? When I say mean to me, I mean to the inconscient, right? Or whatever action is sort of unfolding in the stage that Sri Aurobindo is describing. Right? A glamour from unreached transcendences, iridescent with the glory of the unseen. A glamour from unreached transcendences. Right? There's the supreme principle, the highest of the high, right? Uh, so, in last week's session, we used the Puranic symbol of Vishnu lying on his infinite bed, Ananta, to sort of understand what this transcendence is, right? So, a glamour from unreached transcendences, iridescent with the glory of the unseen. Right? Obviously, he is the transcendent, he is the unseen, but iridescent with that glory. A message from unknown immortal light, ablaze upon creation's quivering edge. A message from the unknown immortal light, ablaze upon creation's quivering edge. Dawn built her aura of magnificent hues and buried its seed of grandeur in the hours. Right. Dawn has come into play. Right? It's a glorious dawn. Now, it's not the dawn that we experience. It's not the earthly dawn. This is the spiritual dawn. For those of you who are familiar with not familiar or perhaps unfamiliar with the Veda, right? Um, uh, uh, Dawn is is called as Usha. That's her name. Usha is the goddess of dawn, and you find a lot of the rishis, calling for her arrival or informing that Usha has come and she has brought her illumination and our dawn has come. Now, this is not the full blown blaze of Savitri, the spiritual sun. It's not that, it's the precursor, it's the prelude. Now, she's the one. Now, there's a beautiful another poem of Sri Aurobindo where he sort of uh, uh, goes into, sort of describes this function of Usha, right? I think the poem is called Lahana. Again, it's a beautiful poem. It's a long poem, but I would highly, highly recommend for those of you who want to know a little more about the idea of the Vedic dawn, the spiritual dawn, the inner dawn, right? So the inner dawn often does not come with what do you say, a straightforward illumination where your mind is already illumined, you're changed, your body is glowing, none of that nonsense, right? It doesn't work like that. Because the inner, though there are palpable signs inside of when this dawn occurs. It's more a psychological thing, right? It's like a it's as if in your mind principle, manas, right? I don't mean the thinking mind alone. It's all the minds, the higher mind, illumined mind, everything, right? So in your mind principle, there is a sort of gate that's been unbarred. And now, why am I sort of making a point about that? Because look at the way he's describing dawn, right? A message from unknown immortal light. So from that, so immortal light, he's using capital L. So there's not the funny visual illumination that we often associate with. But this light implicitly is a thing of knowledge, right? That's how the the Veda invariably describes any illumination. So the illumination is not just a aid for vision, but it's a aid for a revelation, for knowledge, right? For the exposition or the exposing of knowledge, that's been sort of covered by night and darkness and ignorance. It's been covered by that, and it's the you know the light that they are speaking of is that spiritual light, right? So it's not just the uh, plain vanilla illumination that we often associate light with. Uh, Now, what's happening? The immortal light is ablaze upon creation's quivering edge. So now, watch. Creation has come to be, and there is a little quiver. There's a shudder. There's a tremulous sort of vibration that's happening. Uh, Guys, you have to forgive my cats. I haven't figured way to control them. Okay, so uh, they are free to do as they please. So.
They're, they're quite endearing, Mahesh. It's quite nice to hear them.
Um,
And cats
Thank
cannot be controlled. Give up.
Yeah, yeah, I gave up. I gave up.
Yeah.
I don't know from where. But, it's very. I mean, I don't want to say this, but they got a huge chicken leg from somewhere. I do not know. It's sort of. I'll have to clean it up later.
Oh boy.
Uh,
All right. Hmm.
uh, okay. Now, dawn ablaze upon creation's quivering edge. Dawn built her aura of magnificent hues and buried its seed of grandeur in the hours. Now, watch what he's doing, right? So dawn has come, and she's sort of weaving her aura of magnificent hues, this glorious dawn. But after having, sort of woven this aura of magnificent hues, what is she doing? And buried its seed of grandeur in the hours. How? That's spiritual truth, because that's how it works. Dawn doesn't come straight, outright singing song and dancing, I'm here, right? It's a seed, it's a cascade. It just comes wave after wave. That's how it typically works. Unless, you're one of the elected ones or whatever, then you get this entire show in one moment, right? You just thrown into it, right? Like Sri Aurobindo, for instance, right? And buried its seed of grandeur in the hours. An instant visitor, the god had shown. Now, so dawn has come, right? And what has she done? In the hours, and now time has come into play. In the hours, she's sort of burying her seed of grandeur so that it might fruition and it might bear fruit and emerge later. That's what she's doing there, right? Now, this is the typal dawn. This is not the again. It's not just the. It's not even just the spiritual dawn, which occurs many times in the life of humanity based on each individual person's aspiration. Uh, but this is the dawn, the very first dawn, right? And 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 see how he's describing, how Sri Aurobindo is describing, and buried its seed of grandeur in the hours. An instant's visitor, the god had shown. That's it, like a flash. In one moment, in our dawn, it just, I mean, if you want to think of it like an imagery, right? Imagine it's a dark night, and what do you say? Let's say there is a meteor that's sort of shooting through the sky, and it sort of comes in your vicinity, and it's sort of gone off. It's sort of gone off. It's plunged into the valley. Whatever is below, assume you're on a little mountain or whatever, right? You're looking at it from the height. Absolute dark night. A meteor has just come plunged. That's what Dawn has done, and she's gone and buried herself in the hours. And in that flash of light that accompanies, in that moment, an instant visitor, the god had shown. He is seen because dawn has arrived. Look at the logical progression. Again. I mean, for those of you again, I'll sort of constantly go back to the Veda, right? Because not just many, but much of the symbolism that Sri Aurobindo will use follows, uh, the Vedic symbolism, right? So, the Usha has come, dawn has come, and in that instant, you know, visitor again, there's a glimpse of him, the god had shown. On life's thin border, a while the vision stood, and bent over earth's pondering forehead curve. Again, imagine, go back to the same mountain. On life's thin border, because things are just beginning to be, things are getting set up, they're getting established. So, creation happened, dawn came in, the Godhead, that too, he's not a permanent entrant there, right? He's just a visitor. Note that language. There's some aspect of him that's come to sort of oversee, and he has come there on life's thin border. A while the vision stood, and again, vision he uses capital V, so there's not some, you know, vision of one of the 10,000 gods or whatever, right? Now, this is capital vision, this is like big deal, right? Vision stood and bent over Earth's pondering forehead curve. Now, Earth has come into play. Now, remember, Earth is still not conscious, right? So, or rather, not conscious in the sense that we are conscious, right? Um, uh, but there is something that's sort of observing this vision that's looking at Earth from up above, and the way Sri Aurobindo is sort of portraying the curve of the hemisphere, right? Earth's hemisphere, the curve he says, and bent over Earth's pondering forehead curve, right? Earth doesn't know; it's sort of thinking, right? She doesn't have a clue what's happening, but things are unfolding at a very rapid speed. Uh, and that's pondering forehead curve, interpreting a recondite beauty and bliss in colors, hieroglyphs of mystic sense. It wrote the lines of a significant myth telling of a greatness of spiritual dawns, a brilliant code penned with the sky for page. Glorious passage. Interpreting a recondite beauty and bliss, right? It's sort of not explicitly stated out. Recondite beauty and bliss in colors, hieroglyphs of mystic sense. In colors, hieroglyphs of mystic sense. It wrote the lines of a significant myth, telling of a greatness of spiritual dawns, a brilliant code penned with the sky for page. So again, this is to be sort of savored, right? Now, frankly speaking, I don't understand why he says it wrote the lines of a significant myth, right? Telling of a greatness of spiritual dance. A brilliant code penned with the sky for page. Is he hinting at somewhere in Earth consciousness? Is there this lore? So he's calling it, uh, the lines of a significant myth, telling of a greatness of spiritual dance. Is there somewhere in creation, engraved as it were, in some part of consciousness? This lore of the spiritual dawn, this great lore which has happened in many, many cycles of creation. Now, I don't know, it might have been left by a rishi somewhere, right? He has sort of left it like a little mark uh, in consciousness. It's like that imprint, right? A deep, deep spiritual imprint which cannot be erased with the cycles of the ages, right? The creation cycles, right? Cannot be erased. Is he alluding to something like that? Like I said, frankly, I don't understand. But glorious lines to sort of let your mind and heart be washed over by. A brilliant code penned with the sky for page. Almost that day, the epiphany was disclosed, of which our thoughts and hopes are signal flares. Now, look at that. Now, that vision, though it just flashed for an instant, right? It did something. It's come and planted something in the consciousness of existence, right? It's that lore of the, profound spiritual dance. It sort of engraved it, left a stamp of it somewhere in existence. And he says, almost that day the epiphany was disclosed. This grand revelation, it was there, it was so close. It was done, the job was done. If that could have sustained, we wouldn't have had to struggle, right? But still, what he says is, almost that day the epiphany was disclosed, of which our thoughts and hopes are signal flares, right? So that immensity, that deep spiritual light that can, lay bare this problem of existence, give us the knowledge, all knowledge in one flash, was nearly there. It came, but it obviously it vanished. But he still says, but because it came in, because it was engraved, this lore of the spiritual dawn. He says our thoughts and hopes are the signal flares of that thing that went and got submerged inside. Because again, to allude to Master's thought in general, he says what is not in you cannot come out. Right? So, for example, though we are human, mortal, etc., but there is this aspiration for light, and somewhere he says the aspiration presupposes that there is a sun. He says, because I'm thirsty, there must be water somewhere, right? So he's connecting to that. Shrivindu is connecting to that. So he says our thoughts and hopes are signal flares. It's sort of, because that was there. A lonely splendor from the invisible goal, a lonely splendor from the invisible goal, almost was flung on the opaque name. Nah. So, so, so there is this, so inane is like, purposeless, pointless. So, so see what he's doing, right? On again, inane, he uses inane with a capital I, because look at it from the point of view of the inconscient, right? It's saying, what the hell for? Why do you want to try this? I was sleeping all along. Why do you want to disturb me? Why do you want to wake me up, right? Uh, so there is this inane, and it's sort of opaque. It's dull, dark. Can't see through it. Opaque, inane. And what was almost flung on it? He says a lonely splendor from the invisible goal. Again, he's sort of connecting to that little flash that happened, right? The vision appeared. Dawn came in. She plunged her seed. She plunged her aura as a seed into the hours. Uh, uh, and then there was this vision. For a moment, it sort of burst, it gleamed, and and what do you say? Then the lore was written, and then what happens? On this inane, on this thing that questions, or rather says that, why the hell, you know, why at all, that inane, right? On that immense inane, because see, just like the way there are positive infinities, there are negative infinities also, right? So, as in, think of a dark quality, there's an infinity of it, right? So, there is this thing that says, what the heck, I don't want, right? So, that inane, so this the splendor from the, because the goal, you do not know what the goal is. That's why he says invisible goal. The, and he says, entire thing is not opened up, because remember, the vision just glimpsed, you just glimpsed at it, there was just a flash, right? So he says, a lonely splendor from the invisible goal almost was flung on the opaque innate. It was sort of covered up. Now that splendor is sort of, I mean, go back to his cloak, right? The reclining body of a god, that cloak of splendor is sort of thrown on that opaque inane. Once more, a tread perturbed the vacant vasts. So So again, the recurring symbol, right? Because this cycle has happened many, many times. So he says, once more, a tread perturbed the vacant vasts. So again, vast is a capital V. Infinity center. A face of rapturous calm parted the eternal lids that open heaven. So the vacant vasts. And he says, infinity center. A face of rapturous calm. And the easiest way you can imagine is some of the smiling Buddha statues, right? There's this closed meditative state. Of course, Buddha is not speaking of rapture. He's not the rapture type. He's the more nirvana type. But I'm sure you get the drift, right? If you had, or rather, Shiva meditating with a slight smile on his face, a rapturous calm. You know, uh, so a face of rapturous calm parted the eternal lids that open heaven. So there is this. Think of it as an eyelid. So, again, I would like to make a little connection. Uh, again, the Purana is so useful for this, right? Because there's much in the Purana that sort of, that's a work of its age and the type of men that sort of wrote it. And like I mentioned in our very first Savitri session, the Purana comes much, much later in the development of Hindu consciousness and thought and its spiritual knowledge. Um, but there are some things that the Purana just nails absolutely, right? So, especially in the way it sort of leaves its symbols. So, I'd like to point you to this image that we spoke of last week of Vishnu on his bed of infinity, Ananta. And from Vishnu's navel, there is a lotus sort of stalk that shoots up, right? From his navel, there is a lotus stalk, and at the end of the stalk, there is a lotus. On that lotus is seated Brahma. Now, it is said, again, Puranic symbol, so take it from a symbolic perspective, right? Uh, Brahma, every time he opens his eyes, there's a cycle of creation, and when he closes, the cycle goes off. So, you know, so when Master is saying, um, infinity center, a face of rapturous calm, parted the eternal lids that open heaven. You know, so so Brahma opens his eyes, creation comes into being. Close, goes back, right, and the cycle goes on, right. Uh, so parted the eternal lids that open heaven. A form, again, capital F, a form from far beatitudes seemed to near. So something has entered, that we felt the threat first, and then he says that was infinity center. So there's something that is very central. So it's not the periphery of infinity, it's the heart, the very center of infinity. And this very center of infinity, how is he describing it? He says, boss, it's a face, capital F, face. of rapturous calm, right? Of rapturous calm. It's come and sort of parted the eternal lids that open heaven. So it's bringing another movement inside, right? So creation, earth was there, it went, looked, and pondered. Then the vision came, and then something happened. And now he's saying, there's some opening that's made where you're given access to heaven, so to speak, right? So some gate has been sort of opened, eternal lids that open heaven. A form from far beatitude seen to near. So again, form is a capital F. So something big has made its entrance, right? Something really big, that's decisive. It's the center of infinity, a face of rapturous calm, and it's sort of again, he says this form is not just a form because he said rapturous calm. Remember, so he says far beatitudes, right? Far beatitudes seem to near, right? And then watch what he's doing. Ambassadress twixt eternity and change, the omniscient goddess leaned across the breadths that wrap the fated journeyings of the stars, and saw the spaces ready for her feet. And again, it's a glorious, glorious passage. And it's not just the passage, right? Because so when he's speaking of when Sri Aurobindo is speaking of ambassadress, ambassador, ambassadress, the feminine form of ambassador. So, ambassador to what? Now, think again, again, his choice of words, right? Ambassador for what? Who sends an ambassador, right? There is an implicit assumption that there is a country. So, let's call it an immortal country, right? There is a transcendent country. And she comes from there as an ambassador, right? She's coming from there, right? She's not permanently here, right? She's ambassador. She's representing something else. Now, but look at and what is she an intermediary for? It says ambassadress twixt eternity and change. Glorious, glorious definition. Glorious. On one side you have eternity. On another side there is change. There is the flux, the constant churn that's happening. And she's the one who's sort of mediating it, right? She has to come. Now, this is the symbol. I mean, at least in such contexts, when there's mention of the goddess, it's not just Parvati, right? You sort of go a couple of notches higher. It's like the Shakti, right? Purusha, Prakriti sort of thing, right? Uh, it's that level. It's probably Aditi. I don't know. So it is she who's sort of who's the ambassadress twixt eternity and change. The omniscient goddess leaned across the breadths. So she's sort of peeping and looking, right? That wrap the fated journeyings of the stars. So Sri Aurobindo is sort of positing this goddess. She's sort of watching it, and so she's looking at all of space, so to speak, right? Because he has sort of placed even the stars under this space. So she's looking at the entire breadth of it, right? And and watch out of her breath that wrapped the fated journeyings of the stars, and saw the spaces ready for her feet. She knows it's ready. Now, now again, observe the logical progression, right? Now, who came? The Usha is already in. Usha has buried her seed in the hours. She's already done her part of the job, right? Then this goddess is coming, and because that preparation was already done, he says Supreme Mother, right? The Supreme Mother, again, S caps and M caps, right? The Supreme Mother who sort of leans and sees that the spaces are ready for her feet. It's ready for her action, right? Now watch what he does. Once she half looked behind for her veiled son, then thoughtful went to her immortal work. It's a glorious, glorious passage, right? I'll sort of come to. I'll give you another little. What do you say? A similar sort of framing, right? So what's he saying? The omniscient goddess leaned across the breadths that wrapped the fated journeys of the stars and saw the spaces ready for her feet. Once, just once, she half looked behind for her veiled son. Now she's going to begin her task. She's sort of going to enter into this manifestation, right? She's sort of going to come in and just for one quick, confirmation, she's sort of half looking for the veiled sun that's behind. Now the sun is already veiled. Remember, she's sort of come into play. She's the ambassadress twixt eternity and change. She's sort of entering, and already the sun is veiled, even to her. So, frankly, we mortals shouldn't complain at all, right? Even to her, it's already veiled. She knows it's there. She's from there. She's an ambassadress. She's from there, right? And just to confirm if it's there, then and then watch what he says. Then thoughtful went to her immortal work. So remember how we described Earth. Earth, he said, pondering forehead curve. This it's thinking of something, the challenge, the pain, all the unknowns. So the earth is pondering. Now the supreme goddess, who's the mediator twixt eternity and change, she half looks for the veiled sun. Then she's thinking something. She's sort of pensive, right? That I think that's the word. Then thoughtful. So there's something already, she's sort of thinking. So obviously, if she's going to be thoughtful, if she is going to be thoughtful, the problem she's thinking of and worrying about and whatnot is a different league, right? And then thoughtful went to her immortal work. So it's her work, right? And that work doesn't end. It's always her work. Shakti, right? The Supreme Mother, right? And she, you know, begins the session again, in this cycle of creation, another cycle, uh, the way she does it, right? She turns, looks, turns to see, half turns to see if the veiled sun is still there, and thoughtful goes back to her work. Earth felt the imperishable's passage close. The waking ear of nature heard her steps, and wideness turned to her its limitless eye, and scattered on sealed depths, her luminous smile kindled to fire the silence of the worlds. Again, it's
My goodness, my goodness,
it's
Mahesh,
crazy,
this is
right?
crazy. Oh
It's
God.
just right, and
Ah,
and and
yes.
scattered on sealed depths, her luminous smile kindled to fire the silence of the worlds. Now the thing is, even silence has not yet come. Even silence is so silence is sort of making its entry only now. And why? Because
Mm,
her luminous smile was scattered, right? And because she
beautiful.
smiled at it, because she smiled, silence is born now. So, so I'll just read one more line because again it's a glorious line. Kindle to fire the silence of the worlds. All grew a consecration and a rite. R-I-T, rite, ritual. Now watch what he has done. So silence has come into being, and he's saying all grew a consecration and a rite. So all is a so in this particular framing, right? I would like to allude to one of Sri Aurobindo's very short but very popular maxims, right? Where he says all life is yoga, right? Without exception, not just sitting in meditation, not just that. He says all of life, good, bad, ugly, everything is yoga, right? Now, the fact that yoga has to yield certain results and because it doesn't, we have to sort of rediscover what actual poise of ours will sort of yield the result that yoga should yield, right? That it should give, all the illumination and bliss and rapture and all of that, right? Now, similarly, he's using this phrase very carefully. All grew a consecration in the right. Now, what would when is a consecration done? A consecration is done when something new is established. You typically, do a puja or homa, or you do little ritual based on your religious tradition to consecrate that thing for a higher purpose to the divine, right? You will do some yajna or homa, right? The mother goddess has come in, the supreme mother has come in, and uh, without exception, everything has turned into be a, I mean, turned is everything is a consecration and a rite. So when he is using the word rite, it's in the sense of a ritual, right? It's so. What do you mean by ritual? Ritual is a set of it's a gesture which is more than the sum of its parts, right? That it's special. It's supposed to do something. That's what a ritual typically is, right? Now he's saying all grew a consecration under right because the Supreme Mother has come in. She's the ambassadress, and everything is some sort of sanctified suddenly. Yeah, uh, uh, and all gestures are a ritual, right? Everything is perfect, right? Everything is perfect, everything is aligned, and so on. So with that, I'll sort of close for today. And like I mentioned uh, to Hemant, like we were discussing now at the start, I won't continue with this. We won't continue with this canto because all said and done, I want each one of you to sort of go through that experience, in privacy between master and in privacy between master and you, right, and yourself. I don't want to come in between. So, but what we will do is we'll take up some of the more important cantos. And when I say important, I don't mean important from a spiritual perspective, this, that, whatever, right? It's purely from a personal bias. My Swabhava has chosen. I like it, some of these cantos. Just so that you get a sort of sampler for the spectrum of what do you say? For the spectrum of poetry that he has poured here, right? uh, because there are so just based on what we have read so far, please don't think that Savitri is all abstract poetry where he's talking about things you don't get to see in your plain eye or in your plain mind, because this is stuff that happened perhaps in the first few moments of creation. That's what he's sort of going on about. Please don't think like that, because I'll specifically cover chapters on sections where Savitri and Satyavan meet each other, right? And it just sublime love poetry, sublime. So when I say love poetry, it's not in the Byronic sense or even the Shakespearean sense, right? Now, though you will have some shades of it, especially Shakespeare's, but you can see how even a very human emotion called love, albeit noble one, right? Noblest, right, of all emotions, love. You will see in the hands of a sage or a seer the transformation that love undergoes. It's the same love, they're looking at each other's bodies too, So there's nothing like, oh, you're in cloud cuckoo land and I'm also floating on clouds and we have very chaste thoughts. No, it is still very much human. He'll portray that love properly, as humans do. But in the hands of a seer, a God knower, God lover, right? It transmutes into something else. And I want you guys to sample that, right? We'll sort of perhaps even next week we'll sort of touch upon sections. So I won't go through in a sequence, right? So we'll sort of touch upon a little bit of Satyavan and Savitri meeting each other. We'll touch upon Master's journey, as in Master has covered his spiritual journey but in again in a fair amount of detail, right? Again, it's interesting from an occult perspective, and for those of you who are making progress sort of rapidly, or phenomena that you're going through, it's extremely useful to sort of look at the description of each one of these planes, right? So he's talking about all the planes of the gods, everything, lots and lots of planes. He's just zipping through all of them, right? So that we'll cover. And then obviously we'll cover some of the dialogues with death, where especially we'll cover the moment Satyavan sort of drops, like the passage that we read in the very first session. And Savitri, you remember the Savitri's subtle body waking up, her Kundalini rising, and her subtle body waking up, she coming out from the physical sheath, and she sort of looks at the dark presence, Yama, right, the Lord of Death. She looks at him. So we'll cover that passage and some of the back and forth with death, right? So perhaps another 5 or 6 sessions. I think that'll be enough. Little samplers, but like I said, it's again my bias. Things I like. I mean, I like everything, but I feel these are special, and they'll also give you a taste of the what do you say, vastness that is Savitri, right? So it's not just this abstract part. There is the very, very human part, emotions that, you and I would be, extremely comfortable to relate with, though it's sort of refined and raised to another level, right? Uh, and of course, these this tantra type of very technical expositions, and there is a sort of it's almost like a philosophy or a proclamation, right? Because when a lot of times you will see that in Savitri, death has the best arguments. I mean, our man is sort of, he's killing it, right? If you read Death's arguments, that Sri Aurobindo makes, right? Of course, now that Sri Aurobindo is making, you cannot fault it. So it's not this, typical, dumb Bollywood portrayal of Yama, right, sitting on a ugly bloody buffalo. So forgive my language, but sitting on a buffalo, dark guy, horns. This Yama is not that Yama. This Yama is a thinker, right? He's a thinker. He's looking at the problem very acutely. So and you would find that what do you say? His arguments are so compelling that if you pause momentarily there, you'll often wonder what the hell can anybody say to counter this? Because the guy is speaking fact. And like I said, we'll just touch upon some of this because it's again a very special uh, uh, experience to see how Savitri is responding, and it's a formidable exchange. Now, these are not just dialogues that are put in these characters' mouths, by the way. These are spiritual truths, and even though, so it's like this, right? If any popular saint or someone says, oh, God is beauty, immortal, and then you have this basic question in your mind, like the Buddha, right? For example, saying, bloody hell, everyone dies, the body goes ugly, it rots. What the hell are you talking about, right? So, so, so it is that evident, right? Whatever death is sort of speaking of. But then you see that logic that Savitri employs. And like I said, this is not just a philosophical statement, it's all spiritual truths, which means that, death's argument is a fact that we will live with, that, if we are lucky, right, we'll see the entirety of it. And if we are even more luckier, then we will see Savitri's counter argument where she negates him, and she negates him not just with logic, right? With power, absolute spiritual power. She sort of brings it. So we'll sort of take a sampling of these. So with that, I'll stop. So thanks guys for listening. So uh, I'll stop here in for now.
Wow. Thanks a lot for that, Mahesh. It was goosebumps moment all the way through for me.
Mm.
Just the sheer visuals, the imagery, the language. My goodness, that was brilliantly covered by you, explaining as well. At this point, I'll open it for anybody who wants to come up to the speakers panel and maybe share your thoughts, or if you have any questions to Mahesh, please. So, Mahesh, I don't know if you know this poet called D.R. Bendre. He's a
Uh,
Kannada poet,
no, no, Hemant.
D.R. Bendre.
He
He
writes in
is,
Kannada or English?
well, he used to write in Kannada.
Okay.
Um,
Oh,
and he is one of, very, very unique poets.
oh, oh,
Um, and and he was a great kind of follower of Aurobindo. I think
oh.
contemporary also. And in one of his poems, it
Uh-huh.
sounded almost like this book of beginnings.
Oh,
um,
oh.
yeah, especially that Ushe planting
Yeah,
that seed,
yeah,
and and that coming and crashing like a meteor
yeah,
onto
yeah.
the onto the surface of the earth. Yeah, all those imageries. Yeah,
Oh, then I'll
nice,
I'll check him
beautiful.
out. If you have any link, share it, Hemant. I'll check.
I will share it. I'll share it. Yeah, yeah. I mean, he writes exclusive. I mean, he wrote exclusively in Kannada.
Okay.
Um, some of his poems are translated to English. I'll share some of those. I have done a few of his into
Oh, oh,
English.
wonderful. Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
but he is, he is the style and caliber is like the master.
yeah.
Yeah.
And, and also, I would like to make an associated point, right? Uh, an associated point is that this description of the spiritual dawn, um, and if you look at even a basic translation of the Veda by someone who's actually realized it, not just mentally grappled with it, right? Like most of the Indologist type or the academic types. So I would request you not to waste time with that sort of translation. I mean, if you know the Sanskrit, well and good. That's probably the best. A nice little sequence is to go through Secret of the Veda because that gives you the key to the symbolism employed by the rishis. Now, once you're comfortable with that, I mean, even sort of superficially speaking, right? I mean, if you have had a few experiences here and there to sort of arrange what you have read within your being, that's better. Because what happens is once you have this, key and of course grace of the master, right, master and mother, once you have it within you, um, uh, I found that you could read any lay translation, I mean, of someone who has at least realized something, right? You could read any lay translation, and there is almost like a sifting mechanism. There is a sieve that is inside, right? Which intuitively picks the right thing. It says this, not this, right? And that discrimination wakes up within you, right? It wakes up and how do I put it? Uh, if that faculty, if you let it grow and if you aspire for it, there are times where you're reading it and there is almost a parallel voice which is telling you, yes, no, yes, no. It sort of guides you through the whole process, right? And it doesn't matter what you're reading. When I say what, I mean it's spiritual material, right? With aspiration, so if you take that sort of a view and go to this translation of the Veda, you will find that this is some staggering spiritual poetry, staggering, and think of it as the vak, the word, the spiritual word, the word with a capital W, right? The word just pouring out, the Shruti, it's just pouring out of him, right? There's no deliberation, there's no, arranging thought. It comes and arranges itself, it's doing its thing. So whatever, brilliance that you're looking at here in Savitri, of course, this is in English, it's very accessible to you. I mean, to us, living in a very Western dominated world, right? Uh, but once you have a taste of this, I highly recommend that you touch the Veda and get a taste for that, right? And don't be afraid of, that someone should give you initiation, this, that, right? I mean, it's available in books, free of cost. It's there everywhere, floating around. get a just check, as long as the author has had some basic realization, at least basic ones, right? Otherwise, don't bother, because usually people look at the Veda and they talk about, oh, did they ride on donkeys? Did they ride on horse? This is the sort of concern they have. But for sadhaks, there shouldn't be a confusion, right? We go to the Veda for spiritual knowledge. So once you go there, because the style of the Shruti is very, I mean, though it employs a vast variety of styles, right? Of course, it's the Shruti, it's infinite, right? It's divine inspiration. But I would want you to get used to all of this material, right? Of all the different flavors of this, soak your being as much as possible, because once you do that, you'll become, it's as if there is a distinct tongue inside which knows how to savor the spiritual material, right? It's a subtle spiritual tongue that gets formed. And once that's available, you'll be able to suck this honey out of anything in life, right? So, Savitri is not the, of course, you have to go through the passage, etc. But get used to Shruti in other forms also, right? Get used to identifying it. Because once you can identify that, you would see that, the divine inspiration, the higher inspiration is there everywhere, right? So, in fact, Hemant and I were talking about some of this. As long as you know how to catch it, you can form that spiritual intuition, and yeah, so you have access to this extraordinary poetry in the Veda, Rig Veda especially, because by the time you come to Atharva, things get a little silly. Things get very silly. So stick to the Rig Veda, so you should be good.
Beautiful. The key being reading with aspiration instead of curiosity.
Absolutely, yeah,
Yeah,
100%.
yeah. Beautiful. Thanks a lot, Mahesh. Um, Again, calling again. If anybody wants to come up to the speakers panel, raise your hands. If you want to share your thoughts or ask any questions to either of us.
I think we exhausted questions last week.
I think so. It was quite engaging. Yeah. So in that case, I think we can keep it short today. Um, that was beautiful, Mahesh. I mean, I had so many goosebumps moments. And yeah, I think, I mean, I wish we could do the entire Savitri line by line like this, but I appreciate the
It's too,
enormity
yeah,
of that. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. So we can go, as you suggested, we will savor some of the key peak moments um, within this legend and the symbol. And yeah, probably another 5 sessions, like you said. We
yeah,
should have had a little taste of what it is, and then it's left to individual pursuit with aspiration. Then
absolutely, absolutely.
great. I think there's 1 second. Being Karthikeya has something to say. I've just invited him up here. Hi, Karthikeya. How are you?
Hello, Hemant. Lata here. Yeah, thanks for having me. Putting me up. I have one question to Hemant, or not Hemant, Mahesh. Um, Mahesh, my dad says reading Savitri, even though you don't understand a word, not in, don't even try to get the context. It is like a mantram. It has some effect. Is that true?
Very true. 100%. It really does not matter, whether you understand the words mentally or not. I know there's a very dumb thing to say from someone who pretends to be a very rational person. I'm not rational, but I'm just saying, right? You're supposed to be human, functioning, normal. It's a very wrong thing to say, but uh, it's been verified in my experience. last 25, 30 years of being with Sri Aurobindo's material in general, and Savitri in particular. Uh, it does not matter whether you understand the words or not. Like Hemant just mentioned just now, aspiration. I was saying, it's like a little baby pestering a grandfather, right? Saying, why is it like this? Why are you saying this? If you have that sort of an attitude, it's best. So read the material, and how do I put it? It's a question of persisting. But here is what will happen. What will happen is, I mean, if it's a straightforward experience, then you can't refute it, right? Because it's happening in spite of you, whether you deserve it or not. Whether all your traditional training has said, these sort of experiences will have only happen if you do this. Nothing of that sort. It'll just come out of the blue. That you can't deny. But there are subtler things that will happen, and I'll tell you what sort of subtler things that will happen. Literally, it's like a little knot that is there in your mind, right? He'll just when I say he, I'm just symbolically saying, right? Savitri's light or Master's light or force, some aspect of it, it'll come and unknot it, and you will feel it because when it unknots, uh, that same sentence which you read in a particular way before, you will look at it and say, "Oh damn, oh bloody hell, it was always there." But you didn't understand that. That illumination didn't come. And this will happen regularly, right? It just it's almost like riding a bicycle, right? Things like, I mean, reading Savitri or approaching the Shruti is literally like riding a bicycle. You need to get the knack for it. Once you are in that knack, then that skill is available to you. So it's worth practicing, approaching it because it'll beat your reason, right? Your reason or all the funny psychology that the world is sort of very besotted by. It'll just beat all of that, to he'll pulverize it with experiences, whether it's little experience like this mental illumination that I'm talking about, or a bigger spiritual experience. It'll just flood through, it'll just flood through. So uh, when I say true, I say not because anyone else said it, because I have experienced it. I know it. So your dad is, dad or grandfather, I don't remember, but what he says is 100% true.
He has read the whole thing once. I don't even know it is possible to do that. It's such a huge book and it's just so daunting.
No, I mean,
That
if you're a foodie, I can recommend a technique that I typically use, right? Which is, if you're a foodie, imagine it's like the best banquet that's available to you. It's a little buffet that's sitting there, your personal buffet. Yeah. Just go after it. Don't bother about length and all. And again, Savitri is such a book that you don't need to go at it in a sequence. Initially, it's like you can afford to be a child with it. We are all children, in front of that immensity. We are children, so you start from the middle. You see a chapter that sort of piques your interest. It doesn't matter, the divine is not a hard taskmaster, so don't bother about it. As long as you have aspiration, you want to know, what, uh, I mean, you want to progress in your sadhana or whatever. From that standpoint, you approach it, then it doesn't matter. You can go through it. You can, if you're a little persistent, a month and a half should be enough actually.
that's all the question I have.
Yeah.
Thanks, Lata. If you are on Twitter, Lata, follow Mahesh ji. He puts out, I think, on a daily basis, not through his handle. I think inevitable word.
Yeah.
Is that something you run as well, Mahesh?
Yeah, it's run by me and my friend slash mentor Murli. So yeah, it's
Murali.
it's
Okay, you both of you.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, both
yeah.
of us.
Okay,
So you
sounds good.
you put out. They put out every day snippets from Savitri. So, like Mahesh was saying, it doesn't need to be sequential because you can't. I mean, to stay with that sequence, it takes a super mind. But any snippet that you pick up, there are pathways from there into catapulting into an experience. You find it everywhere in any passage you pick up. So yeah,
In my jog.
right. So on that note, Mahesh, I think we can conclude today's session,
Yeah,
and we will revisit this next Sunday.
absolutely. Will do, Hemant. And thanks
Brilliant.
everybody for joining. Thanks for your time, patience.
Thanks a lot. Yeah. Thanks to you, Mahesh, for very beautifully walking us through Savitri, and see you
Master
on
was to serve the master. So,
to serve the master indeed. Yeah.
yeah,
So we will reconvene next Sunday then. Okay.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. Good
Good
night, all.
evening. Good
Good
night, all.
evening. Good day. Yeah.
Bye.
Right.